Hello, this is Joshua, and in this video I will be showing you how to build a to-do list application using React. Now, basic programming knowledge is needed, and if you have fundamentals of React, that will be great. So this is the application that we are going to be building, and to get started, we just need a basic React setup, and I'll be using Create React App boilerplate. I'm using VS Code as my code editor, and to have a basic React project, I would use the Create React App boilerplate. We just need to write npx create React app and give your app a name. I'm calling mine to do. Now this is going to take a few minutes to install, and I'm just going to wait for it. Once it's done, we'll get back to it. Okay, the installation has completed with some errors though, but I'll be able to handle these ones. So let's open our projects to build our app. Now simply open the folder where the to-do application was installed, and we can start building with this by running the npm start command. So you just need to get your CLI open and run npm start. Okay, so with this, the application starts running. Now I know you notice this error. You might not say this, but there's just a few things happening, and I will handle those. But we have our application running. The next thing I want to do is to just do some basic cleanup. Okay, and remove some of the unnecessary things I don't need. So for instance, in index.js, I do not need this CSS file or the reporting. Okay. And the same way, I'm just going to delete the corresponding files. So from index.css, I want to get the style from the body and get that into the app.css. After which we could just delete some of this files. So we can delete app.js, index.css, the logo, and report web vitals. So those can go. And we can just save. Okay, and we can remove logo from here as well, and get rid of this HTML in here as well as the class, and save. All right, so we have a blank file, or a blank page rather. Furthermore, to not bother too much about styling, I have some style scripts I've written, and don't worry, I'm just going to provide this for you. You can copy and paste into your own editor, but I'm just going to paste that here now. So putting all the styles in here, and I'm going to get rid of this body style here. Okay, so I'm going to provide the style for you. Check the description for the link to the file. Okay, so with that, we can go on and start building. Now in app.js, I want to have this surrounding div to have a class of the class name of container. And within this, I'm just going to put a h1 tag, and that's just going to have the title of our app. Let's just call it my to-do list. All right, so we have that. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to do for our to-do list app is we need to have a way to add new items to the to-do list, and for that we would need a form. Now we could easily add a form right here, but I want us to have different components handling different things. So I'm going to create a new component in the source directory, create a file called to-do form.js, and in to-do form I'm going to create a new component called to-do form, assign it to a function, And in here, we're just going to have our form. So we can return a form. And inside this form, we're going to have two elements. We're going to have, first of all, an input with a type of text. Can give it a name of, well, text. And next, we'll have a button with a type of submit. And they just give it a text of add. Now remember, we have to export our component, so let's export it as a default. Export to do form. Okay, so that save that, and we can import this into the app. So right in the app here, we're just going to import the to-do form from to-do form, and we're going to put it into our JSX, so to-do form right here. And if we should save that, we should see the form now added into our page. But I want to apply a little style. Now remember, I provided some styles here, and we just need to use the style that we provided. Okay, so all you need to do for now is to add a class of to do form to the form. If we should save that, all right, we should have that style applied. Now that we have the to-do form, we want it to be functional, whereby if we should type an item here and click on the add button, it gets added to the to-do list. And since this is a form, we can actually handle that action using an onSubmit handler. So I'm just going to create the attribute for onSubmit and assign it to a handler function. Let's just say handle form, or say handle submit. And that means we need to create our new function. Const handle submit equals to, it gets the event as a property. Okay, so what's going to happen next is, by default, when you submit a form, it will likely refresh the page or navigate to a different URL, but we do not want that. So to prevent that default behavior, we use the event and call the prevent defaults here, and that way we can add new items to this form, or rather to the to-do list. Okay, and to add the items to the to-do list, what we need is, we need a way to get the value that was typed into this input field right here. There are different ways we can do that, but I want to go through the approach of using controlled forms now, or rather controlled inputs. Controlled inputs just happens when you use React states to determine the value of an input field. And to be able to do that, we just need to get the use state hook from React. So we need to import that. We need use states from React, and in here we want to set our state. So the state will be text, and we need a function that helps us set the text, and this is how you use the use state hook, and you provide a default value. By default, we want an empty string. So the next thing that's going to happen is, here in our input, we are going to assign the value to the text, and we want, anytime this field is changed, we want to update that text, and we can simply do that by providing a function here which takes an event, and then we set the text with the value from this input. And the way to get that is from the event, you get the target, and that target is the input field, and from there you get the value. So this would update, this will call set text, which will ultimately update the value of text with whatever was typed in this field. The next thing we need to do is to add text into the to-do list, but for now, let's just call the alert function just so that we can see whatever is typed, and we call alerts and we pass in text. We have an error here. Oh, this is not const, rather this should be import use state from React. Okay, how to fix that. So save, no more errors. And if we should type something, let's say do dishes, and you add, you can see we have that alert that says do dishes because we are saving the value into text. Now we've gotten the first part, which is getting the inputs, but we need to add this into the to-do list items. We need to maintain a list of all the items, and we're not going to do that in the form, but rather we're going to go back to the parents element here in app, and in here we want to maintain a list of all our items, and we're still going to use state for that. So why not just import use state from React, and the state we want to create now is for our items. So const open array, we have items, and set items equals to in the use state. Now the default value in this case, since items is going to be a list of items, would be an empty array, okay, where we can add new items to it. So we have this list of items. The next thing we need is a way to keep adding items to this, and for that we're going to create a new function called the function add item, and it's just going to take the value of the text of the item, and when that's is sent to us, we want to set items. Now we are not going to do set items to text because remember, items is an array. What we need is to add the text into the existing items. Now there are different ways we could do that, but the best way is to use by passing a function to set items. When you pass a function to set items, you can actually get the old value or the current value of items, okay, and whatever you return will become the new value that is going to be set into items. And what I want to return is a new array that has the old items destructured into it and then adds in the new text. So this way we maintain an array and we add the text into items. Now even though we have this, we still need a way to tell to do form to be able to add those items. What that means is we would need to pass add items to the today form. But before we do that, because of how functional components work, this could get re-rendered multiple times, and to prevent that from getting recreated unnecessarily, we want to be able to memorize the function, and I'm going to use that using the use callback hook. And all you just need to do is to use that to wrap this function. So use callback, use it to surround the function, and then we need to pass a dependency array. Basically, this function will only get recreated when any of the value provided here changes. For now, we don't have any dependency, so I'm going to leave it empty. And in the for the to do form, we're going to expect it to accept an attribute that will be called whenever a new item is added. So let's just call it on add item, and I'm going to pass in the function of add item to it. So what this means now is in to do form, we're expecting that property. So we can just destructure it out, and on add item, and since that's a function that is expecting the text, here where we have text, we can actually simply just pass on add item and pass the text to it so that it gets added. The next thing I want to do is to clear whatever we have as text. So we could just set text to an empty string. We can now try this out. So if we get here, remember we have do dishes typed. If I should type add, oh okay, I need to save all these changes first. Okay, so let's save this and save this. Okay, so let's go again. So let's say we have do dishes. If we add item, you see that gets added and it clears. We can do wash clothes, add item. You see this field clears. But the only thing that's happening now is even though the field clears, we are not seeing the item that was added. And the reason we're not seeing that is because, well, we haven't rendered it. So we have them stored in items and we need to render it for it to be visible. So for that to happen, I'm just going to take items. And in here, we're going to map, which is a way to transform the values in an array to something else. So we're going to map each item. And I'm just going to use a div. And within that div, I'm going to print out what we have as item. And if I should save that, you can see that immediately we have all those items. So let's add a new item. Say watch a movie. Click on add. Now you can see we keep adding new items into the list. Now that we are able to see these items, well, let's make them look a bit better. Now, of course, we could do that right here, but I also want to put that in a different component, just like the way we did with the to-do form. So I'm going to create a new file called to-do item.js. And in there, we're going to create a new component called to-do item. And of course, we're going to export that as a default component. And in here, we're just going to return. We're going to return this as just a div. And let's expect this component to take in the item as a property. Okay, so we have item, and then we're just going to print out that item in there. Can save this, and then in here, rather than having this div, we're going to replace it with the to-do item. Pass the item prop and set it into the item that comes in. Now remember, we still need to import this. So import to-do item from to-do item. If we save that, yeah, we should still have the same thing as we did before, but now we can go further. So what we want to do is we need a way to be able to select if an item is completed and at the same time be able to delete an item from here. For us to be able to do that, I'm just going to create we're just going to add, first of all, an input. That's a type of checkbox. Our item in here, and at the same time we're going to have our button, which is basically the delete button. And I'm going to use a special character here, which is just going to be an and hash 10,005, which is basically like an X. Okay, so if I should save this, yeah, we see this is it's a bit rough, but remember we have styles, so I'm just going to get some of the styles that we did here and get our item and our item name. So back to the to-do form, or to-do item rather. This div is going to have a class name of item. This p is going to have a class name of item name, and this button is going to have a class name of plain button. Okay, if I should save this, yeah, that looks a whole lot better. I'm wrapping this with a div, and I want this to have a full width, but let's just use a class. So I'm going to add a class here. I'll just call it item div, and I'm just going to add this in here. So the item div will just have a width of 100%. Okay, so this is what I want. Okay, so now you can see this looks a whole lot different. We have these check boxes that we can check here, but we need to be able to track the states for each item. Since we want to track the state for each item, that is not just beyond just the name, we also want to know if it was checked or not. What we have currently is kind of limited in the sense that we only keep the text value of the input, but we need other things, okay, and that also includes if it was completed. So we have to correct that, and to correct that, we first of all have to update how we are adding new items. So rather than just adding a plain text in here, we are going to change that to be an object. Now the object will still take the text, but we also need the value of whether it is completed. By default, it's not, so I'm just going to say false. And also, we would actually need an ID for each element, and you will see why shortly. But for now, they just have an ID. Now, there are different ways you can get an ID. For now, I'm just going to do date.now. This is obviously not the best, but it serves for the purposes which we're using this for. Now, since each new item is no longer a plain string but an object, we need to actually correct this. So when we pass in an item to do item, now in item, it means that this is not a string, and that means here item is not just a plain string we should output here, but we should get the text property out of item. So this will now be item dot text. If we can save that, now we have nothing here, but let's reload and we can add new items. So let's go again, do dishes. If you add that, of course we get that again, but now we also have other properties that we track. The first thing we want to do is to be able to edit an existing item. So say I had a typo and I want to update this. We want to be able to rename or edit each item. And to do that, we're just going to use an input field, and yeah, so no new form, but rather whenever this item is clicked, then we'll make it possible for you to change this into an input field and edit. So for that sounds like using a state. So we need an edit state, and we also need a state to track the new value that is being entered. So to do that, I'm going to create a new state called edit, set edit, and this is going to be a boolean. So use states by default is false, and remember we have to import use states. So import use states from React, and also we need another state for the value. Okay, so we're just going to call this let's just say the new text and set new text, and the default value for this would actually be the current value of the text of the item. Okay, so item dot text, that will be the default value. Now the next thing we're going to do is, depending on the state we are in, so if we are in the edit state, I want to show an input field, right, for us to edit. But if we are not in edit state, we want to keep showing the p text element. All right, so what's going to happen here is, when we're in the edit state, we're going to put in an input of type text, and it's going to be a controlled input. So the name, the value will be equals to the new text, and on change, we're just going to take the event and we're just going to set the new text to the value that comes from this. So e dot target dot value. So what's going to happen is whenever this function, this p element is clicked on, we'll assume that the user wants to edit, and when that's the case, we go straight into edit mode. So for that, I'm going to create a new function. We're going to call the function, let's call it start edit. Okay, and what happens is whenever the p element is clicked, we want to first of all set the edit mode to become true. All right, and we're just going to take the start edit and pass it as the onClick handler for the p element. So on click of the p element, we're going to do start edit. Okay, so if we should save this, now notice we have this. Okay, and when you click on it, you see we have this as an input field now. All right, we can add a new element too. All right, and if we should click on this, notice, you see it changed into the input field. But one thing I want to do is, you notice immediately we changed into the input field, I want to be able to like focus in so that user can start typing. And also I need to fix the style. So to fix the style and that, I need to first of all add a new class here of plain inputs. And to make it automatically focus, I would need a reference to this input to make sure that we can focus into it. And to do that, I'm just going to use a new React hook called useRef, and it lets us have a reference to DOM elements. So useRef, and I'm going to say const, let's say the text input equals to useRef. By default, it's going to be a null, and we're going to assign, and I'm just going to break down this into new lines. Okay, so I'm going to assign a ref to the input text. Let me add a ref here, input text ref. Okay, now when we do this, it means that this ref is not associated with this particular element, and since we have that, we can then get the text input ref. We want to get the current value, and then since the current value or the element is associated with is an input element, we can call the focus function on this. Now at the same time, we need to be careful because remember, current can be null. Okay, and so to be safe, we could use the null quality operator just to make sure we don't call focus on a null object, and we can hit save. Now if I refresh this again, let's get started. Let's go do dishes, and if I should click on this, okay, so we have our style, but we still didn't get focused. This is the issue. We set edit. Now when we set edit, it changes this mode to edit. Okay, edit becomes true. However, we are immediately trying to focus into text inputs, into the text inputs, which has not yet been rendered, and it gets rendered only after edit has been successfully set to true. So basically, we should wait for edit to be set to true before we try to focus into it. The way to do this is to use effect, and with the use effect, we can wait until an action has happened or a state has changed before reacting to it. So what we're going to do is import from React, use effects, and we're just going to add that in here. So use effects, it takes in a function, and in there we want to call text input focus. The second argument that use effect takes is the argument of things that, well, it should listen for before it changes, before it's executed. And what we want to be executed is if we have edit changed. So once anytime edit changes, then we should try to focus into that input. So I can save that. Now let's add a new item again. So do the dishes, add. If I should click on it, notice we are now focusing into that particular element, and we can add and type new things into it. Now notice after I went out, or we do not have a way to restore this input back to how it was, or in fact save it. So let's add that. I'm going to add a new function called save item. And all what save item is going to do is whenever we focus out of input, so let's say we get focused in, we type everything we need to type. Okay, as soon as we leave the input field, we should save the item automatically. And to be able to do that, we just need to pass the save item into the input field, but the listener we're going to use is called on blur. On blur just happens to be called when you focus out of an input element. And we're going to pass in save item. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the new text, and we are going to, in this case we can well, we're just going to use an alert, and at the same time we're just going to get out of the edit mode. So we're going to set edit to become false. Okay, so let's try this out. If I should save, let's add do dishes. If I should click on this, we can edit, and we can say do dishes again. And if we go out, notice it's alerts what we are adding, and at the same time it goes back to the normal mode. But notice that going back to the normal mode, well, our changes are not saved. Well, that's because we haven't saved them yet. To be able to save it, we need a way to update this items list in the main and the root of our application to know that the value has changed. And for that, we need to for that to happen, we need to add a new function. So here we're going to have a new function, const, and we're going to call it update item. We're going to do the same thing we did before with the use callback, and it's going to take in some arguments here. But first, let's pass in the function. Okay, now to update an item, we need a few things. The first thing we need is we need the ID of the item that we're updating. Okay, and then any other value that we need to change. So we'll take a new argument called new values. Okay, and then you can pass a partial keys. So remember, we have text and we have completed. You can pass any of these that you want to update for the specific item with the ID you provided. So in here, we're going to update the new item, and to do that, well, we just need to find the item in the list. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to use the same format of set items where we get the old items, but we're not just going to return an array here. We want to get the specific item that we need to update. The immutable way we can do that is from the old items, we try to find the index of the item with the ID. So we're going to say const the target item index is going to equals to the old items, and we're going to find the index of the item, where the item ID is equals to, well, the ID we just passed. Now if if the target item index is -1, it means that this is not a valid item we're trying to update. We're just going to return the old items, and that means we're not going to make any updates. However, if it is found, what we're going to do is we're going to have new items, and this is just going to be from destructuring the old items. Okay, to get a new array. And in the new items, we're going to update the index of the target item, okay, by getting, okay, first off, here we're just going to get the, since we have the target item index, we are also going to get the target item, and the target item is basically at the old items, at the index, at the specific index of that item. So that gives us the target item. We get the new items by destructuring the old item, and in the new items we are going to update the position of that target item, and we're going to update it with this, an object. We're going to destructure the target item, and then we're going to destructure in the new values. So this way it gets updated in an immutable way. And lastly, we just return the new items here so that it is updated. Okay, so I did forget to pass the dependency array here, and I'm going to do that right now. There are no dependencies, so we can go on. So the only thing I need to do now is here in the to-do item, we're going to pass in that function as a new property. So I'm going to call it on update item, and it's going to be assigned to the update item function. Remember, update item requires two arguments. First is the ID, and secondly is the new values to be updated. So we can save that, and with that saved, we can go back to the to-do item, and here when we save an item, rather than calling alert, we're going to change this. So what's going to happen now is, instead of calling alert, we are going to call the function that we need, which is the on update item. We're calling on update item, and remember the first argument is the ID of the item, and that can be found from item.id. Come on. And the next thing we need is the object of the new values field to be updated. Now the fields has to match exactly with the field that's on the items. So for instance, we want to update the text in this case, and so to update the text property, will pass in the new text that we want to send as text, and everything else remains pretty much the same. So we can save this. So let's try this out and see if it works. So let's add a new item, do the dishes, add. If we click on this, we can edit, and we can still do dishes again. If we click out, you see that was updated, and yep, we are able to update items now. The next thing we're going to do is to delete an item. So basically, anytime this button is clicked, we're just going to delete a specific item from the list. And to be able to do that, well, we're going back to the app, and we're going to add a new function that will help us to delete the item. So just going to call it const delete item. Just like we have already, we're going to use callback, and we're going to create a function. This function is just going to take one argument, which is just the ID of the item we want to delete. Okay, and for now, no dependencies. So we're still going to use the set items function to set the item, and what we're just going to do is we're basically going to just filter out. So basically, old items dots filter. We're going to filter out all the items, an item, as long as the item is not equals to, sorry, the item's ID, that ID is not equals to the ID we're trying to delete. Okay, so when you call the filter function, it tries to select specific items, and anyone that's true is returned for, it's kept. Anyone that false is returned for is discarded. So we are just want you, as long as the ID of the item is not equal to the ID we're trying to delete, true is returned, and they are kept, except for the one we're trying to delete, which is removed from the list. So what we're just going to do is pass delete item. We're going to add it into this array here. So on update item, and now we're going to add on delete item, and this is going to be equals to delete item. So back in the to-do list, we now expect on delete item, and what's going to happen is we're just going to add a listener to this button. I'm going to give it a type of button, and an on-click handler for this should be, well, I can just do this inline here. So whenever this is called, it's a function that would just call on delete item, and we're just going to pass in the ID, and the ID of the item is in item.id, and that will delete the item. Let me collapse this here. All right. Okay. So we can save this now, and let's add a new item. Let's see, do the dishes, and we had the other one. Let's see, buy clothes, and if I should click on do the dishes, see, that goes away and we are left with buy clothes. Okay, I can add a new, I can add do the dishes again. If I click on this to edit, delete, see, that all works. Now there's something else that we're missing. Now notice here we are mapping through the to-do items. Now it's important when you map through an item to provide a key. And in some cases, people might want to provide the key as the index, but that could cause serious render issues. And the best thing you need when you're providing the key is just to provide a unique value. And we do have one, which is the ID. So remember, we have to pass the key of item.id into the to-do item. Now with being able to edit and being able to delete an item in place, one more feature we need to add is to be able to mark an item as completed. So if you click on an item, well, it should say that it's been completed. And all I want to do is just to put a strike through the item when it has been completed. So to do that, we're just going to go back to our list, and here we're going to create a new function called complete item. Okay, and when you complete an item, what we just need to do is, remember, we have this on update item function that can update any value. So we'll call on update item. We're going to specify the item ID we need to update, and then what value do we want to update? We want to update the completed property, and in the completed property we want to set that to true, which means the item has been completed. When we do that, the other thing we need to do is right here in the text of the item. When an item is completed, we want to, like I say, put a strike through the item to say, okay, this has been completed. And for us to do that, we just need to add a class here. So we have this item name, but in addition to the item name class, we want to add another that says when the item is completed, we want to show the strike. We want to add the strike class, otherwise we are not adding any class. And I'm just going to double check. Okay, sorry, it's a crossed class. Okay, crossed, and that's what we want to add there. Now the next thing that's important is on the checkbox. We have to use the checkbox to determine if the item has been completed or not. So what we're going to do is this complete item. We're going to add this to this on change, and we're going to provide complete item. Now this can take an event, and rather than just saying true, because we can complete an item and at the same time we can make it not completed anymore, we want to get from the event dot target dot checked. So if it is checked, it is completed. If it's not checked, it is not yet completed. And we can test this out. So I'm just going to refresh, add a new item, and if I should click on this, you can see checked is completed, and we see it has been cancelled out. If I should uncheck it, you see it is back, and if I click on it, it's checked again. Now just one small minor detail I want to add is when your item is completed, well, I do not want us to be able to edit it anymore. So to do that, where we have start edit, well, I'm just going to do this and say if the item is completed, well, return. Don't do anything. Don't try to get into the edit mode. Okay, we can save that and try again. The dishes, we can click on it to edit, click to edit, but once it's completed, if we click on it, oh wait, that didn't work. Okay, so let's see what could be the issue. Oh, I misspelled completed. Okay, so completed, you should mind your spelling. All right, so let's try that again. Refresh, do the dishes, let's add that. We can click this. If we check it, now we can no longer click it to get it edited. Okay, but you can always delete an item. All right, so we have a functioning to-do list application, so we can again add new items. So let's go do the dishes, get some clothes, read a book. All right, we can click on an item to get it checked. We can click on it to edit, and when we click out, it is saved. So we have all this added into the item, but there's something I just want to add here as a bonus. If I should refresh this page, well, my list goes away, but I want us to be able to like keep this stored so that if you reload, you'll be able to find your list just the way you left it. Now this can go in several ways, but we're just going to keep it simple. We're not storing this into an external database or something because we just want our to-do list here on our device. So to be able to persist or to save the item so that when we come back to the browser or if we refresh the page, we still see the items, we just need to store this using local storage. And to do that, what we're going to do is say every single time there's an update to the items, then we store that into the local storage. And we can use that using React hook use effect. So with use effects, we can call a function that runs every single time items is updated. But remember, we need to import use effect. And then we're going to pass in a dependency array with items so that this function is called only when items is updated. When items is updated, what we're going to do is to say local storage dot set items. Now please note this set items function has nothing to do with the items. No, sorry, I said item. It has nothing to do with the fact that we have items as a variable. It's just the function assigned with local storage. We're going to call it a name of to-do list items, and we're going to pass in the variable the value of items. Now note that to do local storage only stores string, so we need to convert this to a string, and we do that by calling json dot stringify on the array, okay, so that it's properly converted to a string before being stored in the local storage. Now if we do this and we have a new item and we refresh, now if you notice we still don't have it saved after refreshing. That's because even though we are storing it to the local storage, we are not yet reading from it. And to do that, well, we can call the order function in here. So instead of using the default array, we have to use local storage dot get item, and the name of the item we have is what? To do list items. Okay, please note that this is case sensitive. Now this will be fine except for the fact that local storage stores it as a string, and remember we want an array here. So to be able to get an array here, we need to convert this into an array or into an object. And the way to do that is to do the opposite of json.stringify, which is json.parse. And we've sent that into we get whatever we get from the local storage, we use it to convert this back into an array. But just in the case where we don't get anything from the local storage, I want to pass a default value of an empty array that would get converted into the actual array that said items would use. And we can save this. Okay, so after saving this, we're going to refresh and let's see what we have. So we're going to add a new item. Say do the dishes, add item. Okay, wash clothes, add item. Okay, and as soon as we refresh, you can see that all items that we added are actually being maintained here. So I refreshed, so I'm refreshing as you see, but we maintain the list. Now notice, even if I choose select an item which is completed and I refresh the page, okay, you see that it is being being maintained. But the only thing, if you notice, is while this is showing that it's completed, this is no longer checked. And let's just quickly fix that. So to do item, I'm just going to go to the input, which has this unchanged, and I'm going to add the checked property, and it's going to be assigned to item.completed. Okay, and we can save that. All right, so we can uncheck, check back, and if I should refresh, now notice it still remains checked even after reloading the page. We can delete an item, and if I refresh, notice we still have the list maintained. So this way, whatever you add to your list would always remain even after you come back to your application. And you can see we just did that using 2 lines of code per se. With this, we have built a functioning to-do list application, and beyond that, we're able to learn a lot of concepts in React. We're able to use hooks, we're able to use parent and child components, and we're able to store this locally so that it remains even if the page is refreshed. And I hope you had fun building this to-do list application, and I'll catch you in the next video.